Oh, that's better. Camera is on, and you are all very welcome indeed to the latest edition of Nick Griffin Beyond the Pale. And wherever you are in the world, whatever time it is with you, whether you're watching live or later on, you're all very welcome. Thank you very much for joining me. Let me just dive into the chat and check that we're working. And yes, we are, because even Ivan Cooper is with us, as is Yvonne Eggerstrom. Good afternoon to you, sir. Great to see you here. Right then, what have we got for you today? Well, I want to talk, of course, I have to, about the war on Iran and other people, but I have got some really new material for you today. So it's sort of building on what I've told you is going on over the last few weeks, but more on that in a minute. Let's start off, I think, with something else. Yeah, it is in Britain, polling day tomorrow. In a wave of local elections. Frank, it's about 1/3 of the whole of Britain, actually. It's in Wales, Scotland, and very large swathes of Britain, including London and Birmingham. And it's looking exciting stuff because we're reliably told by all the pollsters that Keir Starmer's Labour Party are going to be obliterated and the Conservatives aren't going to do much better. Now, I've got here a recent opinion poll, which I think makes very interesting viewing. So here it is. Right, so this is very, very recent, and it's showing Reform, which had dipped recently, opening up a 10-point lead. This is an insurgent party with a handful of MPs, now on, there we go, 27%. This is of people who voted last time and are intending to vote again. This is if they're asked, how would you vote if there was an election tomorrow? So, but it's pretty much a good proxy for the locals. So a huge lead for Reform. And bear in mind, Americans and Europeans, that Britain has a first past the post system. If that spread of support was uniform across the whole country, then Reform would win every single seat. It isn't, of course, and in many places the Greens, just about on second place, level neck at present now with the Tories, are going to take a lot of seats. Certainly places with large Muslim communities are going to fall to the Greens, I think, in very large numbers, because they are particularly critical of what's going on in Gaza. The Conservatives risking being damaged by a Tory vote is a wasted vote argument from Reform. The Labour Party suffering the same thing. Vote for Labour and you might get Reform, so vote for the Greens. The Lib Dems will do a bit better than that is shown because they're very good campaigners and their support is very unevenly spread. They're very weak in many parts of the country, especially working class areas, and very strong in others. So they won't do as badly as they appear. Appearing for the first time in a mainstream poll that I've seen under their own, a legitimate mainstream poll under their own name, as opposed to lumped into the others, is Restore. That's Rupert Lowe's operation, with 3%. Now, that may be a bit depressed at present because people who are in the know might know that Restore aren't standing in any of these upcoming elections, although there is a pro-Rupert Lowe team standing in his constituency in Great Yarmouth. So there's not much point telling the pollsters that you're going to vote for Restore if you know that they're not going to be in the election. My guess, however, is that most of their people don't know they're not going to be in the election, or they're thinking in general terms, and 3% want to vote Restore. Except, of course, again, that when it really comes down to a general election, when Reform will have dipped, and either the Labour Party or the Greens will have gone up, the argument which will weigh very, very heavily on would-be Restore voters, given that they will always be in the minority to Reform, at least until after Reform have formed a government and let everybody down. The argument will be, if you vote for Restore, you will get a Green Labour coalition. You don't want that, do you? So hold your nose and vote for Reform, because at least Nigel has said that he's going to deport 400,000 illegals. He hasn't told you he's going to let in 1 million Indians, but that's a different matter. So that is what I think is the significance of that poll. So there's no point really judging or trying to judge exactly where it's going to fall tomorrow. We won't know until Friday morning. I'm sure that Brother Jim will cover it on the Templar Report next Tuesday. But whether he does or doesn't, I will be here next Wednesday with a rather in-depth look, I hope, at what happened in the polls and what they tell us going forward for British politics. I know it's rather intrinsic. Some of you Americans aren't that interested, but nevertheless, I'm a Brit. Many of my followers are Brits, and I've got to cover it. Right then, let's just dive into the chat and see who is with us. Now, joined by Krista Strid. Hello, John Kopasaki. Hello, John. Good to see you. And Marty BFP, Anthony H. Yep. Ivan Cooper voting for the Greens. Yep. His turkeys voting for Christmas. Well, to be honest, Ivan voting for all of them. His turkeys voting for Christmas in different ways. If they don't actually want to slaughter you, they're certainly going to stuff you. Right then, let's carry on, shall we? Because I've got lots for you. Back into StreamYard so I can see what's going on. Right then, and into the notes. Yeah, the war. As I say, I do promise that I've got some new stuff for you. In fact, a lot of what I regard as really important hard facts. Now, it's not just oil and gas supplies that are at issue. You know that. We talked about fertilizer in particular. But it's not just oil, gas and fertilizer being hit by the war and the blockade. The conflict is also damaged and at present completely cut off the helium production of Qatar from the rest of the world. Well, so what you think? Because, you know, I used to think that helium was a rather unusual and sort of unwanted gas element, which was only used for blowing up party balloons. But it turns out it isn't. Where have I got the helium? Have I got the helium? I hope I have. Yes, here we go. So, slightly, it was grabbed off a phone, this. The US is the world's biggest producer of helium globally. So the light blue block, showing at 81 million cubic meters, is the USA. But look at that purpley block, or dark blue. 63 million cubic meters, more than all the others, a lot more than all the others put together. That's Russia, Algeria, and some others. It's a huge amount of the world's helium. Now, you might say, so what? Why doesn't it want to blow up all these balloons? Because AI chips and semiconductors cannot be made without helium for cooling. It's also used in nuclear power, the aerospace industry, advanced weaponries, fiber optic cables, quantum computing, and many other high-tech industries. During COVID, one Malaysian factory making computer chips closed down, and as a result, it shut down the car production of basically the whole of Europe for some weeks. And far worse is in store for much of the world if this current blockade goes on for a lot longer. So helium really, really matters. Now, if it's just a blockade and everyone's working for peace and there's one way or another peace in a couple of weeks, like we're still told to believe is a possibility, then it doesn't really make a huge amount of difference. This is going to lead to some serious economic pain, to inflation, to shortages, all the rest of it, but things would sort of go back to normal. But take another brief look at this map. Sorry, not map, graph. Consider what would happen to the world's economy and especially to the value of America's helium if that big dark blue block is simply taken out, because Qatar is no longer blockaded, but because Qatar's industry has been destroyed by Iran. Because that is what I think the people running this whole show are working towards, as I've said before, and I'll explain more about it. Now, you might think, if you're a sweet, good and naive person, well, the Americans wouldn't do that to their allies. They wouldn't be so monstrously wicked as to incite Iran to destroy Qatar. Surely they wouldn't do that to their good Arab allies. Come on. We're their good British and their good European allies. And they used Ukraine and the Russia conflict to impose sanctions against Russian gas. And they blew up, had the Ukrainians blow up the Nord Stream pipeline in order to cut Germany, particularly, off from Russian gas completely. This isn't an attack on Russia, because Russia has simply kept on selling us their gas, except nowadays it goes through Turkey and India, and they make a big profit on it when they sell it on to us. For that matter, Russia has also been able to continue selling gas to the rest of the world, and in fact now is even selling oil and gas to all the rest of the world, with the sanctions largely lifted. But those sanctions, those energy sanctions, were never aimed at Russia. They were aimed at Germany and the other nations of the European Union and at Great Britain. That is what the people running America do. This isn't, as I must say again, this isn't about the ordinary Americans. It's not done in your name any more than the monstrous things done by Britain over generations, actually. In some cases, they've been done in our name, but it's not us. This isn't the Americans. The American people, especially the people of the southern states, were the very first victims of this Yankee upper-class elite bankster mafia. And now the rest of the world catches it. And Qatar is in line for a lot more of this. Because Qatar, if they only had helium, the Americans might leave them alone, but they don't. They're also the United States' primary competitor for liquefied natural gas. Now, most of America's liquefied natural gas comes from fracking. It's a byproduct, actually, of fracking for oil. And until recently, at best, the whole fracking industry was only really kept going by a sort of bubble investment from people thinking one day they're going to make lots of money. And at best, when the price is reasonably high, pretty squeezed margins. It wasn't making much money. Frack gas has never made America much money unless prices are abnormally high. So I thought, I know what I'll do for you when I was preparing this show. I thought I will ask Meta AI, that's one of the AI bot things that I use from time to time, tell me about what's happening with the value of America's liquefied natural gas in view of the war on Iran. It came back with this short version. US frack gas is dirt cheap to produce versus world liquid natural gas prices now. The Iran war spike is a pure windfall for US producers. Now, bear in mind, of course, that these producers, like the people who run the military industrial complex, they have a large number of American politicians in their pockets. So they tend to get what they want. And what they want is to be able to liquefy their gas and to ship it around the rest of the world. And they don't want Qatar in the way, because having Qatar producing a huge amount of gas nearer to America, nearer to India, nearer to all sorts of customers, meant that American gas was harder to sell. Well, nothing's now leaving Qatar, so American gas is all of a sudden easy to sell. It's transported in things like this. Here you go. There's a liquefied natural gas tanker, and a lot more of these have been built recently. The Americans actually are still building huge export facilities to ship even more out. Wonder why they were doing that when the world market looked entirely stable. Isn't that interesting? So there we go. That is one of these here ships. Now let me tell you a bit about what goes out in these ships and the price, and what AI, two different sorts, told me. And one is that it explained that in shale regions where gas is a byproduct of oil, like the Permian and Delaware fields, the gas price at which it breaks even is tied to oil. And at present, the break-even point in Delaware is about $56 per barrel of oil. So if oil is lower than that, they're losing money getting their shale gas out. And at $100 a barrel, on the other hand, they're making so much money on the oil, the gas is basically free. So right now, the American gas price is a fifth. It's about $3 or $4 a barrel, a unit, whereas in Europe it's nearly $15 a unit, and in Asia it's $16 a unit. It's gone up over half in the last month. As a result, the gap between the price of fracked gas in the United States and elsewhere when it's liquefied is 1/5. It's a huge difference. So America is able to start exporting rather more. Now, Americans might ask, well, why in that case aren't our gas prices going up if the American big industry is taking advantage of all of this and shipping all this extra gas abroad at extra profit? Actually, it's because they can't, because the American export facilities are already working flat out at 94% or more, so they can't export any quicker than they have been. But they've got new facilities, as I said, coming on stream very soon, so they're going to be able to export. When they do export more, then the price for Americans goes up as well, just as American gas prices, as in petrol and diesel prices to Brits and so on, are going up as well. If Americans think that the machinations of the various American elites are going to benefit you, you have another think coming. Now, the AI briefing concluded for me, the Iran war has turned US fracked gas from squeezed margins to printing money for exporters. US production costs haven't changed a bit, but the world price has doubled. Now, the conflict, quite apart from what's been taken away from Qatar's capability to export at present, so much damage has been done to their plant that already about 13 million tons of Qatari liquefied natural gas per year is going to be offline for 3 to 5 years. It's an awful lot of money for the American operation, and the fracking operation was one of the American financial bubbles which could burst like the subprime business of 2008 and bring the whole lot crashing down like a pack of cards, like a house of cards. So at least this way, they've got rid of one of those bubbles, because gas fracking in the United States is now hugely profitable, and it's going to stay that way for at least 5 years. Far more if the devastation gets worse, as I believe it will. Because Qatar is an ally, but so America can't attack Qatar directly, of course not. And the Israelis won't, because Qatar is one of the countries which makes noises about being anti what's going on in Gaza, but basically is fairly pro-Israel, pro-Zionist. They're all in it together. But if Iran can be provoked to attacking Qatar and to devastating what's left of their industry, then it's not America's fault, is it? No, of course not. It's the Iranians' fault. It's those crazy mullahs who've plunged the world into a disaster. So blame them, don't blame us. Very convenient. So Qatar is a target in this war as much as Iran is. Even more so is Saudi Arabia, which I would say is the key target for the people, not for the Israelis, probably for the Israelis dealing with Iran, which is the only real regional power near them. That's the key target. For the people running America, Saudi Arabia is even more important. Now, I explained last time how the petrodollar, contrary to many people's beliefs, ended in 2024. Sorry, 2024. So this isn't about preserving the petrodollar. It's about creating a sort of new petrodollar. Now, how much this matters is that can be shown by this. The petrodollar agreement, whereby the Saudis agreed to price all their oil sales in dollars and only sell them in dollars, ended 2 years ago. Now, from 1974, when the agreement was signed, I told you there'd be some new stuff. Sorry, it's statistics. From 1974 until 2022, the Saudis didn't sell any oil, not a single barrel, to anybody except in dollars. Then they reinvested those dollars in the United States because you can't really spend them anywhere else. In November 2023, there was a slight chink in this, the first break. Saudi Arabia signed a deal with China, giving a credit deal, which meant that 5% of their oil wasn't sold in dollars. 95% was in November 2023. Now, just before the war, 35% of all Saudi Arabia's oil is sold in currencies other than dollars. So it'll go, when it's recycled, it'll go to their countries and not to the United States. You can't buy anything, not even government bonds in America, with Chinese currency. You can only buy things in China with Chinese currency. So the petrodollar recycling mechanism switches to other countries. And the trajectory by the end of this year, even before all the disruption of the war, was for the amount, the proportion of Saudi Arabia's oil being sold in dollars to fall to 50%. So that's 100% to 50% in 4 years. That's a staggering lurch. It really is. So something had to be done about this by the people running America, by the financial interests of America, who otherwise were going to be hit very badly. And I would say that there's 7 different groups who between them benefit enormously if what I've said is likely to happen, if what I said they want to happen happens, the destruction not just of Iran, but of the hydrocarbon industry of the entire Middle East, with the exception, they hope, of course, of Israel, but it hasn't got that much, not yet. So the first thing for the powerful forces, really of Washington, D.C., and the military industrial complex, who wants its allies completely subservient so they will only buy American-made weapons, first thing is this is a lesson to all clients. All the client states of the United States are supposed to look when this has happened at Saudi Arabia and Qatar and think, if you cross the United States, if you cross Washington, the White House and Wall Street, bang, you get blitzed. So we'll behave ourselves. That's the first lesson. It's pour encourager les autres, to make the other client states of America think twice before moving away from the world hegemon. Second group who really join, who really benefit from this, are, of course, as I mentioned last time, the Messianic Zionists. I showed you and discussed last time the Eretz Israel map. I will flash it up briefly. We won't be on this for very long. They are the map which Jabotinsky, who's the founder of the revisionist school of Zionism, it was a revision, they wanted more, basically, for their Israel, who founded the political thread which ended up as Netanyahu and Likud, whose billionaires basically pay for the politics of a large chunk of America and the whole of the counter-jihad movement in Britain and Europe, although that is a different story. This is the map that they believe that God has given them, not as a sort of take it if you want it, but you must take this land in order to keep faith with me, your God. And if you look at the red line, which is the borders of Eretz Israel, Greater Israel, a huge chunk of it is in Saudi Arabia. It's enormous. Now, how on earth is Israel to take that off Saudi Arabia if it's still a stable state with a large air force and vast amounts of money, which buy huge amounts of influence all over the Western world? Clearly, something has to be done, but it can't be done by Israel, can't be done by America. It's done by Iran. Oh, they wash their hands of it, don't they? They wash their hands of it. And there's two strands, basically, of Zionist power and thought in Israel deciding on this and wanting this war. There's the really crazy religious Zionists for whom this is mainly a supernatural imperative. Their God has told them they must take this land, but also they believe they have to have a great war and chaos. It's a Kabbalistic thing. They have to have a great war and chaos before their Messiah will come and rule the world with a rod of iron from Jerusalem. So they want this. They don't really care how bad it gets. For ordinary Israelis, it doesn't really matter. They will always just to be exploited by these people. It's just another one of these priestly caste rip-off operations. And they screw their own people as much as they do everybody else. Some of their own people know it, the majority don't. It's not that different to Britain, really, is it? But then there's the other side of the Zionist movement, or of the right-wing Zionist movement, because a lot of the left are against this madness. There's the other side, more the Netanyahu line, the secularist Zionists. And for them, it's just practical. To get their Eretz Israel, they have to destroy Saudi Arabia, or someone has to do it for them. So that's what's going on there. The third force, which benefits massively from war, particularly this war, and from a near world war, is the military industrial complex, which is always, everyone's understood, being the weapons manufacturers, to a degree the banks. But now it's all the big AI companies, because you cannot run a modern war without vast amounts of AI clout. It's actually becoming the determining force in modern war in many, many cases. Brings me on to the fourth group who want this, the Federal Reserve. Now, again, I spoke last time about how the Federal Reserve, the private bank in North America, which not only creates all the credit in America and lends it to Americans at interest in a huge usury scam, against the Bible, against all humanity, it's wicked. But again, that's another story. But on top of that, since 1944, virtually all trade in the world has been carried out, international trade has been carried out, guess what, in dollars. And the Federal Reserve has printed those dollars and sold them to the other countries for real things to come back. plucked out of thin air and exchanged for real money, gold and goods. It's been fantastic for the people running the United States. Actually, it's been pretty good for the people in the United States. It's where all the wealth basically has come from, particularly since systematically the people running the United States deindustrialized the place and destroyed the real wealth and the real power and the real prosperity of the actual wonderful American people. Now, figures here. Again, I promised you something new. From 1944 to 1971, quite a long period, 80 to 90% of all world trade was carried out in dollars. From the 1970s to the 1990s, that dropped to 80%. The next decade, by the year 2000, it had dropped to 70%. By 2010, it was about 60%. This is a steady decline. By 2021, it was only 50% of the world's trade, international trade, was carried out in dollars, and last year it was 47%. This is catastrophic. How do you reverse this? How do you persuade America to buy a lot more in dollars? Well, how about destroying 25% of the world's entire carbon energy system and everything that comes from it, when you've just stolen a vast amount of extra oil in Venezuela and you're producing vast amounts of it, and you can sell it to them, providing they pay in dollars. Right, before I go on to point number 5, let me have a quick look in the chat, see who's in here with us now. Andy Lighton, good to see you. Lady Matriarch, Brian Hope is here. Roger Madison has dived in as well. Great, good stuff. Andy Lighton is a very smart chap, says the Wahhabi Muslims are only a symptom of the illness. Absolutely. Yeah, the Wahhabi crazies wouldn't even be there if Mr. Wahhab, who is not an Arab, hadn't, according to many particularly Shia Muslims that I speak to, and to the Brits, the British Imperial Secret Service, who found it very convenient that crazed Wahhabi extremism would divide the natives, set them against each other in places like Cyprus and in places like India, and thereby make them easier to rule. And ever since then, these crazy Wahhabi Muslims, ISIS and Al-Qaeda, they've been the weaponized Islam used by the political and military elite of Britain, the United States, and of Israel. Right now, in a huge swathe of northern Africa, just south of the Sahara, there are gangs of psychotic Wahhabi Islamist extremists slaughtering entire villages of Christians every single day, and they are armed and enabled by NATO and the Western powers, by the French. So it's not, I'm not blaming the Israelis for this, or Zionists controlling the United States. The French do it, the British do it, the Americans do it. They all of them use these crazed, psychotic Sunni Muslim extremists as weapons of foreign policy. That is what they do. Paul Talbot has joined us as well. Hello, Paul. Yep, you're all absolutely right in many of those comments. King Charles III is the Antichrist. Well, there's an interesting possibility. He is certainly not the Messiah. He is at the very least a very naughty old boy. There's no doubt about it. I watched what he was saying, and there he is shilling for war in Ukraine against Christian Russia, shilling for the war against Iran, shilling for the climate change nonsense. The man is a monster. That's it. Our king is a monster. Sorry if you're a royalist. I'm not there attacking actually the whole of the institution, but this king is a monster. And it's really now all coming out. He's always been in favour of the mass immigration, destruction of the English, especially in our own country. We've always known that. But now when he's around the world there shilling for world war, yep, if people think that he is the Antichrist, I can understand it. I won't necessarily say he is, but he is not a good one. That's, I think, for sure. Let me just dive back into the chat and make sure, sorry, back into the app and make sure I haven't got a picture up there. It's been my lovely face talking to you all the time. I'm sure you're grateful for that or something. Right then, fifth, in terms of the power groups who are very, very happy with the idea of seeing Saudi Arabia and Qatar destroyed. as well as Iran, is the fact that, again, it comes back to the big oil companies in the United States. The destruction of cheap Middle Eastern capacity makes the expensive oil and gas of the USA and its New World satellites much more valuable. I mentioned Venezuela. That's particularly important because Venezuela's oil is so heavy that it takes a lot of processing before it's actually any use. Prices had to be high before that windfall, which Donald Trump has gone and taken, actually really benefits the people running America. 6, Thiel, Musk, the tech brothers, high out of their minds on wealth and power and the flattery of their neo-reactionary philosophers, also want this because they want the technate. Now, again, I won't go into this at length today because if you want to know more about it, go back to last week's show and to others. But last week I didn't have a map, so I got it for you this week. Here is the map of the technate of North America, produced by a literally techno-fascist organization, which was very powerful in America and Canada before the war, showing their aim for a technocratic state, not a democracy, not a republic, a technocratic dictatorship, basically a North American Nazi Germany, but instead of Hitler, they'd have technocracy running it. And it included Greenland, Canada, America, Cuba, Mexico, and the north of South America, including Venezuela. And that map, my friends, is the exact same one which Pete Hegseth showed to Southern Command about a month ago and described that as the greater North America, where North America's military writ and everything had to run without any challenge whatsoever. So the technate has pretty much been revived. And just to remind you that the key figure in Technology Inc., this fascist movement in the 30s in Canada, before it was banned by the Canadian government for being pro-Nazi at the start of the Second World War, he was a man called Joshua Haldeman, who, when the movement was banned, skipped away to South Africa to live for a while and became Elon Musk's maternal grandfather. So those people, they're still there. They've regrouped themselves. And of course, these days, the techno thing, the idea that AI can run the world better than politicians, actually, you've got to sympathize with that to a degree, haven't you? You can understand where people are coming from. This is what they want. Now, again, if you're an American, you might think that looks quite good. I like the idea of a greater North America with all the rest of the world being in chaos. I think I'll do rather well out of that. It doesn't work like that. This is only for the super rich. If you think they care for ordinary Americans, go and look at the streets of North American cities and all the drug addicts and all the homeless people and all the ex-servicemen who, if they haven't yet committed suicide, are drinking or jabbing themselves to death. That's how they regard you. Just as scum, as inconvenient breathers of good air to be got rid of as soon as possible. Normal Americans, they want your children. Oh, yes, they want your children. Some of them want some of your children for very, very evil practices. But all of them want your children for their wars. And all of them want your assets transferred into their piles of loot. And the whole technate idea being promoted by Thiel, Musk and all the others isn't just about building American power against the rest of the world, which if I was American would be something I'd have potentially some sympathy with. This is also, in fact, before anything else, it's about the abolition of democracy in the United States itself. Now, democracy is a flawed thing, but it's part of the Constitution, which is, as you know, the foundation on which America is built. And it cannot be destroyed. The democratic part of the Constitution cannot be destroyed without crushing the American people. And they cannot be crushed without taking away their freedom of speech, taking away their ability to disarm, destroying churches which are run by decent, proper, human, Bible true Christian pastors, and most important of all, by taking away the guns from the American people, by destroying not just the First Amendment, but also the Second Amendment. That is what rule by technocracy would mean. How on earth do these people who genuinely believe they're that close to establishing this thing, how do they believe they can persuade the American people that things are so bad that they have to turn to a technocratic government? Well, perhaps by having given them an insight or a vision of just how bad democracy can be, by giving them the apparent insanity of the recent Trump. What if he isn't insane at all? What if that's all an act just designed to make people, not just the Democrats, but pretty much everyone, think, oh my God, why don't we just have it run by AI? Because it won't go mad. It will go mad, my friends. It'll go mad in a very different and an even worse way. So to sell the whole technocracy solution of central bank digital currency and total GovCore surveillance of everything, everywhere you go, everything you spend, everything you say, it's such a radical solution that to sell it, you have to have a really radical, drastic problem. And there's no problem like the world that's going to be created for all of us, including the ordinary people of America, by the destruction of the hydrocarbon industry of the whole of the Middle East, because it will crash the dollar. It will crash the stock market. It will crash everything. It'll bankrupt basically every farmer. And there'll be BlackRock and Monsanto and all the rest of this clique of psychopathic kleptomaniac corporations and CEOs will simply swallow the whole lot up. To do it, they need chaos. So they're creating chaos. They need a great and wicked solution in order to impose, to sell this great and wicked disaster. So that's what they're doing. And it is great and wicked because cheap energy equals cheap food. And it comes from fuel, from fertilizers, from pesticides and transport. And dear food means starvation. Not for Americans and Brits. We're just going to have to tighten our belts and eat steak rather less, as certain other people, to be mentioned in a moment, have told us we should do in any case. But in Africa, in large parts of Asia, dear food will mean starvation. And starvation means political chaos and revolutions and civil wars and bloodshed and mass migrations to places like Britain. So we're also going to get it in the neck. And the mention of the stakes and so on brings us, of course, to the seventh and final bunch in this interlocking network of global psychopaths who want chaos and disaster, the World Economic Forum. Now, the World Economic Forum is not a thing on its own. It grew directly out of the Rockefeller Foundation. There's its logo, which was established with the money which the Rockefeller family made out of basically a snake oil salesman getting into oil and taking over effectively the whole lot. And the Rockefeller Foundation then went on, it's gone on to do all sorts of things. It basically provided the money and the think tanks and the impetus which created the United Nations, because old man Rockefeller believed that one world government run by friends of his would be much more efficient than local democracies. It also created the Club of Rome, which went on to produce the various ideas which were the precursors of climate change. Paul Ehrlich and the idea that the world was going to run out of food by the year 2000. All these fantasy predictions from the Club of Rome, from limits of growth and so on. The Rockefeller Foundation also was key in promoting, side by side with the United Nations, the World Health Organization, which of course was, oh, hang on, let's get rid of that, also heavily implicated and responsible for the COVID scam. And as you know, people look at the World Health Organization. Behind all that was the Rockefeller Foundation. And the whole worldwide mass of sort of techno bureaucrats that the Rockefeller Foundation had brought together and came up with this idea that there's far too many people in the world and it's going to be disaster. Therefore, they have to shrink the human population deliberately and systematically, perhaps rather than starvation, but if needs be, starvation will do. And when you want massive depopulation, you think you need it really quickly. And you need it really quickly because now that you don't need hands, people anymore, because the robots will make it all, you need to get rid of the people before the people get rid of you. That's how the global elites are looking at this. Even the more benevolent ones, rather than less wicked ones, are quite open about the idea that they insist that we, the middle class of the world, that's all the people of the first world, America, Britain, Sweden, Germany, France, Australia, etc., we must shrink our carbon footprint. And since we refuse to do it to any meaningful way, then creating so much chaos in the world that we can't afford to fly, we can't afford to eat steaks, we can't afford to go outside the 15-minute cities they have planned. It's absolutely ideal. It's what they want, and it's why they are happy to plunge us into poverty. And that is why when people ask me what's going to happen about Iran, despite the fact that peace is thoroughly sensible, and without peace there's going to be world economic disaster, I don't think there is going to be peace. It's why I think that you should prepare for far worse than what we've seen already. You can expect the continued blockade at present to keep on strangling the supply. It's partly because then when it all goes horribly wrong, Trump and all the others can say, look, ever so sorry, we tried really hard to negotiate. Time and time again, we extended the deadlines. We gave those crazy mullahs more and more time. We gave the Iranians time to overthrow them. They didn't do it. In the end, we had to act. And sorry, it's all gone terribly wrong. We didn't expect this to happen. So they've got to drag this out for a while. So you can expect the blockade to keep strangling supply for some time. But then before it ends, expect Donald Trump, on behalf of the monsters, to launch a new blitz against Iran, and to keep it up so viciously, so crazily, attacking so many civilian targets that they hope that Iran is provoked into wrecking the entire Gulf, particularly Qatar and Saudi Arabia, as I'd said, beyond repair in retaliation. And then Trump will declare victory, wash his hands of it, and walk away, leaving a quarter of the world's entire hydrocarbon capacity in ruins, because so many forces want it. As I said last week, the best chance to stop that, ironically, is the saner heads in Israel, who are losing an awful lot of tanks and men in the Lebanon. And they know perfectly well that before the latest ceasefire, there were far too many holes, jagged gaps appearing in their Iron Dome. And some of those men who, on October the 5th, 2 years ago, were on the verge of going to war, civil war against Netanyahu and his side, some of those men may insist on peace. And if they do, none of this will happen. And in due course, the strangulation effects of the blockades, once lifted, will gradually evaporate. Things won't be as bad as I'm telling you they're going to be. But I think this is unlikely. Now, just more on this point, Jim Dowson on his Temple show yesterday, in fact, talked about the fact that the Israelis had lost 200 of their Merkava tanks in Lebanon, which is a figure that staggered me. So, well, I believe that Jim had researched it. I went to check it out myself, and I came across this headline, which really sums it up. I think if you also found that, if you saw it and found it difficult to believe, the idea that those ragtag, already smashed and defeated Hezbollah guerrillas could destroy 200 of the best tanks in the world. Here you have a headline from one of the main military analyst groups. Its picture has been, the top of the picture has been lost as I've cropped it, unfortunately. Can't tell you exactly where it's from, but here was the headline. It's a very reputable source, military source. Israeli army takes heaviest tank losses in over 40 years as Hezbollah ambushes and destroys 21 Merkavas in one day. So there you go. That's confirmation that they really are up against it in Lebanon right now, which is why they might also say, well, we don't want peace long term. We still want our greater Israel, but for now we've got to, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It's time to take a step back. Finally, on this, it's about to get even worse for them, because Hezbollah has just started using fiber optic drones. Now, drones are very important in modern warfare. The whole conflict in Ukraine has changed modern warfare drastically, and Hezbollah tanks were designed for the old war. Now, the Israelis have surely already got very good jamming capacity to jam drones which are guided by radio control. It's not really that difficult. But Hezbollah have now got fiber optic drones. Now, fiber optics works by literally the drone is connected by a thin spool of fiber optic wire, which can be up to 20 kilometers. That's what, 12 miles long. It's a huge thing. And because they're actually controlled on a wire, the same as you might a PlayStation or something similar, plugged into the computer, they cannot be jammed. so they're far more dangerous. And the Telegraph, just today, in fact, has this headline revealing Hezbollah attacks Israeli military helicopter with fiber optic drones. They attacked, this is the first one, they've attacked one helicopter with fiber optic drones, forcing its withdrawal so that the officer it was there to rescue, having been injured, died. So it's already having an effect. But that's just the start. They won't just have one little group of fiber optic drones, and actually they can be made with very cheap fiber optic cable, and they can be 3D printed. So they'll be churning these things out by the 100 at this very moment, and it's going to shift the battlefield very drastically. And in particular, it's believed that Hezbollah's Radwan, which is their special forces, it's bigger than a regiment, it's a very large special force. They're extremely well trained. They're far more effective than Hamas ever have been in Gaza, and they haven't been thrown into the battle yet. I think we'll find as this comes out that those fiber optic drones are being operated by the very best fighters that they have, who are, I'm sorry to tell the racists who think these are all ignorant ragheads, some of the best and bravest fighters in the world. So the Israelis are up against it. And you should pray that Hezbollah, those so-called terrorists, knock out every last Merkava tank and drive the Israelis out of Lebanon again. Not because you necessarily support them, although all the Christians in the Middle East do, apart from some in Lebanon, where the Zionists provoked such bitter civil wars that they simply can't stand each other. But all the Christians of Palestine, occupied Palestine, they all support Hezbollah. But even if you don't, you should understand that Hezbollah hammering Israel in the IDF in Lebanon is the only thing that might force the Israeli elite to come together and say this war must stop. And they're the only people with the power to say to all the other non-Jewish crazies out there, you've got to stop this because we need to stop it. That's the only thing that can bring peace. If they don't force, if the generals of the IDF don't force an end to the Netanyahu-Trump war, then it will end up with the destruction of the energy base which supports your normal world. So if they don't, you better stock up, not just on food and medicine and ammunition. That's a tip for Americans only, not Brits. You'd also better start learning to fly drones, because World War III is going to be waged by the global elites, not just against Iran and Russia and China. It's also going to be waged against us, against you. And it's a war, World War III, if they manage to start it, which must in the end be turned into a civil war, not against immigrants living in our midst. That's what they want. They want us fighting. So we're so busy fighting each other, we don't think about fighting the elite. We've got to have one day, the world has to have a civil war against the transhumanist oligarchs. Regardless of their faith or lack thereof, regardless of what ethnic group they originally come from, regardless of all of that, the transhumanist oligarchs, the servants of Satan in our world, have to be overthrown, or they will enslave us forever. And that, my friends, is the God's honest truth. Right, time is up. I'm going to leave you with an end slate in a moment. I spoke a couple of weeks ago about how the grooming of young girls, up to 1 million gang rapes, according to a Labour MP in Britain, by punk Islamist, mainly Pakistani gangs. Primarily some years ago, most of the grooming going on now is by very recently arrived boat people, immigrants, individuals and small groups, rather than from a whole community, and it still needs to be stopped. But again, that's another story. But the grooming which went on a massive scale, far worse than is going on now that so many girls are aware of it, so that so many parents are aware of it, so that so many working class communities are aware of it and looking out for it, so that even the police sometimes do something about it. The grooming that was going on before it was reduced by those factors was only one side of a very, very unpleasant coin in Britain. And the flip side of that coin, the flip side to the grooming of girls, was industrial scale racist attacks on young white men and boys, up to and including murder, time and time again. And the counter-jihad people don't like to talk about this. They like to wind people up by reminding them of the grooming scandals and so on. And there's a lot to be wound up about. They don't mention this because they don't want people to think, to understand that actually the Muslim community is quite tough and that you go against them drunk at your peril, because they want people going against them drunk at their peril, because they want it all to blow up on behalf of Greater Israel. You know that. I've told you time and time again. So they don't talk, these people. They could wind the people up by reminding them about Chris Donald. They mention him sometimes. But Gavin Hopley, Ross Parker, 100 or more others, names are out there. But they don't mention them. They don't want to remind us about them, so they are largely forgotten. But the British National Party, when we were the first people nationally trying to break the grooming scandal to get something done about it, we were talking just as much, in fact, even more, about the hidden scandal that no one would talk about, the police wouldn't act about, the media kept quiet about, the politicians denied, the murder of young white lads in our country. We talked about it, nobody else did. And now it's effectively completely forgotten. So I want to finish with a song which we had recorded by our record label we had at the time, Great White Records. It's a song called Forgotten. Now, it says on YouTube, where I found this, I stumbled across it the other day, that this is by Dave Hannam. Now, Dave Hannam did some really good songs and sung a lot of songs. He sung My Corporal Fox, for instance. I've played on here before as an end slate. But this isn't Dave Hannam. This, I don't know why they say it is. This was Lee Hagan, who was another Yorkshire singer, a staunch Orangeman, by the way, as well as a BNP activist. It's called Forgotten, and it's about the murder of Gavin Hopley, who, aged 19, was beaten to death by a gang in Oldham. So I'm going to play that to you in a minute. It's Forgotten, and I think it's a very fine song. Perhaps someone will grab it, rip it, and put some of the faces and images to this, because there's no video that goes with this. It really deserves it. So I'm going to leave you with that. I'm going to ask you please to remember to join me next Wednesday, same time, same place, Nick Griffin, Beyond the Pale on Purge TV. Join Brother Jim Dowson on the Templar Report tomorrow here, Thursday, 4 o'clock. And also join him, if you possibly can, for the Templars Sunday service at 4 o'clock on Would You Believe It Sunday. They're all really worthwhile. Look forward to seeing you again next week. Thank you so much for being with me. Do please leave comments, give thumbs up, likes, and all of the rest, and share, and get the word out. I leave you with the reminder that all that is necessary for the triumph of evil is that good men do nothing. So you're good men and good women. Get out there and do something. Thank you, and Deus Vult.
Just a boy of 19 years, he brought his joy, he brought his tears. 19 years, they go so fast, but the memories will last, will last. These prosperous times, these happy days, these lives to live, these changing ways. New generation British youth, but soon we'd see the painful truth, the painful truth. 19 years that made the boy, 19 years his parents' joy, 19 years they stole away, 19 years lost in a day, lost in a day. And so it was that winter's night, wrong part of town they made him fight. Dark as the night and cold as steel, they cared not for the pain he'd feel, the pain he'd feel. And the boy fell to the ground, lying still he made no sound, all alone without a friend. 19 years came to an end, came to an end. And the blood it drained away unto the cold streets where he lay, and the rain came falling down unto this foreign part of town, this part of town. 19 years that made the boy, 19 years his parents' joy, 19 years they stole away, 19 years lost in a day, lost in a day. They said the murderers would pay, they said they'd put those men away, but years have gone and they're still free. There was no justice we could see, that we could see. The politicians looked away, they cannot who those people slay. 'Cause if you're white, your life is cheap, and all our people do is sleep, all they do is sleep. But Gavin Harpley will not die, we will keep on asking why. We'll keep his memory alive, and for his sake this land will thrive, this land will thrive. 19 years that made the boy, 19 years his parents' joy, 19 years they stole away, 19 years lost in a day, lost in a day.